Sarah Martinez packed the last box into her small blue car. She looked at her old apartment one more time. The walls were empty now. The place felt cold and sad, just like her life had been for the past year. She drove away from Phoenix, Arizona, that morning. The city was hot and busy. Too many bad memories lived there. Her ex-husband had made sure of that. Now she was going to Montana, a small town called Willow Creek. She had never been there before, but they needed a teacher, and she needed to start over. The drive took 2 days. Sarah stopped at cheap motels along the way. She ate fast food and drank too much coffee. Her hands shook a little when she thought about her new life. What if the people did not like her? What if she was making a big mistake? On the second day, the land began to change. The desert turned into green hills, then came the mountains. They were huge and beautiful. Sarah had never seen anything like them. The sky seemed bigger here. Everything seemed bigger. She reached Willow Creek in the late afternoon. The town was small, very small. One main street with a few shops, a gas station, a diner, a general store, and lots of pickup trucks. Sarah felt like she was in a movie about cowboys. She found the school first. It was a brick building with a flag in front. Not very big, but it looked nice, clean and well cared for. This would be her new workplace, her new start. Next, she drove to her new home. It was a tiny house behind the school. The landlord had told her it came with the job. Sarah parked her car and got out. The air smelled different here, clean and fresh. She could hear birds singing, no city noise at all. She was getting her first box from the car when she heard voices. 2 men were talking nearby. She looked up and saw them walking toward the general store. One was normal-sized. The other was enormous. Sarah stopped and stared. She could not help it. The man was the tallest person she had ever seen. He had to be almost 7 feet tall, maybe more. His shoulders were as wide as a door. His hands looked like they could crush a watermelon. But he walked carefully, slowly, like he was trying not to scare anyone. The smaller man next to him was talking and laughing. The giant man nodded and smiled. His voice was deep but quiet when he spoke. Sarah shook her head and looked away. She felt rude for staring. She grabbed her box and went inside her new house. The next morning was Monday, her first day of school. Sarah woke up early. She was nervous. She put on her best dress and fixed her hair. She wanted to make a good impression. The school was only a short walk away. She met the principal, Mrs. Watson. She was a kind woman with gray hair and a warm smile. "Welcome to Willow Creek," Mrs. Watson said. "We are so happy to have you here. The children are excited to meet their new teacher." Sarah's classroom was on the first floor. It had big windows that looked out at the mountains. She spent the morning getting ready, putting up posters, arranging desks, making name tags. At lunchtime, she decided to walk to the general store. She needed some groceries, and she wanted to see more of the town. The store was bigger inside than it looked from outside. The aisles were narrow but packed with everything a person might need. Sarah got a cart and started shopping. Bread, milk, eggs, coffee. The basics. She was in the fruit section when it happened. She was reaching for apples when something bumped into her cart. Hard. The cart rolled away from her and hit a display of oranges. Oranges went everywhere, rolling across the floor like orange tennis balls. "Oh no. I am so sorry." The voice was deep, very deep. Sarah looked up and up and up. It was the giant man she had seen yesterday. Up close, he was even bigger than she thought. He had brown hair and kind brown eyes. His face was red with embarrassment. "I am so clumsy," he said. He was already moving, trying to catch the rolling oranges, but his huge hands made it hard. He was being so careful not to squish the fruit. Sarah was only 5 feet and 2 inches tall. Next to this man, she felt like a child, but she could see he was more embarrassed than she was. "It's okay," she said. "Really, it was an accident." She started helping him pick up the oranges. Other people in the store were watching. Some were smiling. Others looked worried, like they thought the big man might step on the small woman by mistake. "I'm Jake," the man said. He was kneeling now, trying to make himself smaller. "Jake Thompson, you must be the new teacher." "Sarah Martinez," she said. "How did you know?" "Small town," Jake said with a shy smile. "News travels fast here. Everyone has been talking about you." They finished picking up the oranges together. Jake's hands were gentle despite their size. He stacked the fruit carefully back in the display, like he was handling eggs instead of oranges. "I work at the Thompson Ranch," Jake said. "Outside of town and part-time here at the store. If you need anything, just ask." "Thank you," Sarah said. She meant it. His kindness surprised her. Jake started to walk away, then turned back. "Welcome to Willow Creek, Miss Martinez. I hope you like it here." He left before she could say anything else. Sarah watched him go. He had to duck under the doorframe to get outside. His truck was parked nearby. It was huge, too. Everything about him was oversized. Sarah finished her shopping in a daze. The store clerk, an older woman named Betty, rang up her groceries. "That's Jake Thompson," Betty said without being asked. "Been here all his life. Nicest man you'll ever meet, but... What?" Sarah asked. Betty shook her head. "Poor boy has been alone for years. His size scares people off, women especially. They take one look at him and run the other way." Sarah thought about this as she walked home. Jake had seemed gentle, careful, not scary at all, just big. That night, she sat on her small porch and looked at the mountains. The stars were brighter here than in the city. Everything was quieter, peaceful. She thought about her first day, the friendly principal, the curious looks from the townspeople, and Jake Thompson, the gentle giant who apologized for bumping into her cart. Sarah smiled to herself. Maybe coming to Willow Creek was not a mistake after all. Maybe this small town was exactly where she needed to be. She did not know it yet, but her life was about to change in ways she never expected, and it would all start with the kindest man she had ever met. A man who happened to be twice her size, but had a heart bigger than his enormous frame. Tomorrow would bring new adventures, new challenges, and the beginning of something beautiful. Sarah's first week of teaching went better than she had hoped. The children were sweet and eager to learn. They ranged from 6 to 12 years old, all in one classroom. It was different from the big schools in Phoenix, but Sarah liked it. The kids asked her lots of questions. Where was she from? Did she like Montana? Was she married? The last question made her pause. She was not ready to talk about her divorce yet. "No," she said simply. "I'm not married." After school on Friday, Sarah decided to explore the town more. Willow Creek had one main street with several small businesses. There was Murphy's Diner, First National Bank, the post office, and a few other shops. She went into the diner first. It smelled like coffee and pie. The waitress, a woman about 40 with blonde hair, smiled at her. "You must be the new teacher," the woman said. "I'm Linda Murphy. My husband owns this place." "Sarah Martinez. Nice to meet you." "Sit anywhere you like, honey." "Coffee?" Sarah chose a booth by the window. Linda brought her coffee and a piece of apple pie she had not ordered. "On the house," Linda said. "Welcome to Willow Creek." As Sarah ate, Linda sat down across from her. The diner was not busy in the late afternoon. "So what do you think of our little town?" Linda asked. "It's very nice. Peaceful. The mountains are beautiful. Different from the city, I bet. Takes some getting used to. We all know each other here. Sometimes that's good, sometimes..." Linda shrugged. 2 more women came into the diner. They saw Sarah and came over. Linda introduced them as Mrs. Henderson from the bank and Mrs. Chen, who ran the post office. "We heard about your little run-in with Jake Thompson," Mrs. Henderson said with a smile. She was a well-dressed woman in her 50s. Sarah felt her face get warm. "It was just an accident. He was very nice about it." The 3 women looked at each other. Mrs. Chen, a tiny Asian woman with gray hair, shook her head. Jake is a good man, she said. The best. But what? Sarah asked. Mrs. Henderson leaned forward. Honey, Jake Thompson is not like other men. Well, you saw him. He's enormous. That doesn't make him a bad person, Sarah said. Oh no, Linda said quickly. He's wonderful, sweet as pie, would give you the shirt off his back, but there's always a but, Sarah thought. He's been alone for years, Mrs. Henderson explained. Women are scared of him. Can you blame them? He's nearly 7 feet tall, weighs over 300 pounds. Makes a woman feel like a little girl next to him. Mrs. Chen nodded sadly. I remember when he was young. So many broken hearts. His and theirs. Women would be interested at first. Then they would see him and change their minds. What do you mean? Sarah asked. Dating is hard when you're that big, Linda said. Where do you take a man like that? Regular chairs break under him. He can't fit in most cars. And dancing. Forget about it. Mrs. Henderson stirred her coffee thoughtfully. Remember Jenny Walsh? She dated him for a few months about 5 years ago. Oh yes, Mrs. Chen said. Pretty girl, really liked him too. What happened? Sarah asked, though she was not sure she wanted to know. She said people stared everywhere they went, Linda said. Made her feel uncomfortable, like she was with a circus act instead of a boyfriend. That's terrible, Sarah said. It was, Mrs. Henderson agreed. Jake took it hard. He's been even more to himself since then. Mrs. Chen looked out the window toward the general store. He's such a gentle soul. Never raises his voice. Never gets angry. But his size, it scares people. He scared me at first too, Linda admitted. When I first moved here 10 years ago, but then I saw him help old Mr. Peterson change a tire. Jake lifted the whole back end of the truck by himself. So careful and gentle, like he was handling a baby. He brings me my mail when it's too heavy, Mrs. Chen said. Never asks for anything in return, just sees me struggling and helps. Mrs. Henderson nodded. He fixed my fence last month when the wind knocked it down. Wouldn't take any money for it either. Sarah listened to all this with growing confusion. These women clearly cared about Jake. They spoke of him with fondness and respect. But they also seemed to think his size made him unsuitable for love. Has he never found anyone? Sarah asked. The 3 women shook their heads. Not for lack of trying, Linda said. But what woman wants to feel like a child next to her husband? No offense, honey, but you're tiny. You'd barely come up to his chest. Sarah thought about this as she walked home. She was small. She had always been small. In high school, boys had called her fun size and pocket rocket. Not in a mean way, but she had always been aware of her height. But Jake's size had not scared her. Surprised her, yes, but not scared her. The next morning was Saturday. Sarah decided to do some grocery shopping. She needed cleaning supplies and more food. The general store was busier than during the week. Jake was there, working behind the counter. He was wearing a blue work shirt that looked like it was made special for him. Regular shirts would never fit those shoulders. Good morning, Miss Martinez, he said when she came to pay. His voice was quiet, like he was trying not to. Draw attention to himself. Good morning, Jake, and please call me Sarah. He smiled. It was a nice smile. Sarah, it is. How are you settling in? Very well, thank you. Everyone has been so kind. A woman behind Sarah in line huffed impatiently. Some of us have places to be, she said loudly. Jake's face went red. Sorry, Mrs. Garrett. He quickly rang up Sarah's items, his big fingers surprisingly fast on the small keys. Take your time, Sarah said. But Jake was already giving her the receipt. As she left, she heard Mrs. Garrett say, That boy needs to learn when to chat and when to work. Sarah felt angry on Jake's behalf. He had only been polite. Nothing more. She was loading her car when she heard a child crying. A little boy, maybe 7 years old, was sitting on the sidewalk. His knee was scraped and bleeding. Before Sarah could move to help, a shadow fell over the boy. Jake had come out of the store. He knelt down beside the child, making himself as small as possible. Hey there, buddy. Jake said softly. That looks like it hurts. The boy looked up at Jake with wide eyes. Most adults looked big to a 7-year-old. Jake must have looked like a mountain. But the boy did not cry harder. Instead, he stopped crying altogether. I fell off my bike, the boy said. I can see that, Jake said. Let's get you cleaned up. Jake pulled a clean handkerchief from his pocket. It was white and looked tiny in his huge hand. He dabbed gently at the boy's knee. There we go. All better. You're a tough guy. The boy smiled. My dad says big boys don't cry. Your dad is right, Jake said. But it's okay to cry sometimes. Even big boys like me cry. You cry? The boy asked, amazed. Sure do. When I'm sad or hurt, it's normal. Jake helped the boy stand up. Where's your mom or dad? Mom's in the bank, the boy said, pointing across the street. Come on, I'll walk you over there. Sarah watched Jake take the boy's tiny hand in his enormous one. They walked slowly across the street. Jake matched his steps to the child's small ones. When they reached the bank, a woman came running out. Tommy, there you are. I told you to wait by the car. I fell, Mom. But Jake helped me. The woman looked up at Jake. Way up. For a moment, her face showed fear. Then she saw how gently Jake was holding her son's hand. Thank you, she said. That was very kind. No problem, Jake said. He let go of Tommy's hand carefully. You be more careful on that bike, okay, buddy? Okay, Jake. Thanks. Sarah watched this whole scene from across the street. She saw how Jake had made himself small and non-threatening. How gentle he had been with the boy. How patient. She also saw how the mother had been afraid at first, just because of Jake's size. As the mother and son drove away, Jake stood alone on the sidewalk. He looked tired, sad maybe, like this happened a lot. Sarah made a decision. She walked across the street to where Jake stood. That was very kind of you, she said. Jake looked surprised to see her. Oh, I didn't know you were still here. The way you helped that little boy, it was sweet. Jake shrugged his massive shoulders. He was hurt, couldn't just walk by. A lot of people would have, Sarah said. It was true. In the city, people walked by hurt children all the time. I'm not a lot of people, Jake said quietly. No, Sarah thought, looking up at this gentle giant. You certainly are not. She was beginning to understand something. The people of Willow Creek were not cruel. They cared about Jake, but they saw his size first and his heart second. Maybe it was time someone looked a little deeper. The storm came without warning on a Tuesday evening. Sarah was driving home from a teachers' meeting in the next town over. The meeting had run late, and now it was almost dark. She was 20 miles from Willow Creek when the snow started. At first, it was just light flakes dancing in her headlights, pretty and harmless, but within minutes it became heavy. The wind picked up, blowing the snow sideways across the road. Sarah gripped the steering wheel tighter. She had never driven in snow like this. Phoenix had sun, not snowstorms. Her little car felt like a toy being pushed around by the wind. The road became harder to see. White snow covered everything. The yellow line in the middle of the road disappeared. Sarah slowed down, afraid to go faster than 15 miles per hour. Then her car made a terrible sound. A loud bang, followed by grinding and scraping. The steering wheel jerked to the right. Sarah fought to control the car as it pulled toward the side of the road. She managed to stop without going into the ditch. But now what? She was stuck on a country road in a blizzard. Her cell phone showed no signal. The snow was getting deeper by the minute. Sarah sat in her car and tried not to panic. She had a little food and water in her purse, a blanket in the back seat. But it was getting cold fast, and no one knew where she was. She was starting to shiver when she saw headlights behind her. A big truck was coming down the road, moving slowly and steady through the snow. The truck pulled up behind her car. The headlights were bright and welcome. Sarah could not see who was driving through the snow and darkness. A truck door slammed. Heavy footsteps crunched through the snow toward her car. Someone knocked on her window. Sarah wiped the fog away and looked out. It was Jake Thompson. Even bundled up in a heavy coat and hat, there was no mistaking that size. Sarah rolled down her window. Snow blew into her face. "Sarah, are you okay?" Jake's voice was full of concern. "My car broke down," she said. "I think something is wrong with the wheel." "Stay right there," Jake said. "Let me look." He walked around her car, his boots crunching in the snow. Sarah watched him kneel down and look at her front tire. Even kneeling, he was as tall as most men standing. Jake came back to her window. Snow was already covering his hat and shoulders. "Your tire is flat," he said. "But that's not the worst part. Your axle is bent. This car is not going anywhere tonight." Sarah felt her heart sink. "What am I going to do?" "You're coming with me," Jake said. It was not a question. "We need to get you out of this storm. I can't just leave my car here. We'll come back for it tomorrow. Right now, we need to get you somewhere warm and safe." Jake was already moving. He opened her car door and helped her out. His hand was huge, but gentle. Even through his gloves, she could feel how strong he was. "Grab what you need for tonight," he said. "Don't worry about the rest." Sarah got her purse and the blanket from the back seat. Jake took her arm to steady her as they walked to his truck. The snow was up to her knees already. Without Jake's help, she might have fallen. His truck was enormous. The seat was so high that Sarah could not climb in by herself. Jake lifted her, up like she weighed nothing. His hands were careful around her waist. "Sorry," he said as he buckled her seatbelt. "I know it's awkward." The inside of the truck was warm and dry. Country music played softly on the radio. It smelled like coffee and something else, something nice that Sarah could not identify. Jake got in and put the truck in gear. The big vehicle moved through the snow like it was made for this weather. Which it probably was. "Where are we going?" Sarah asked. "My place," Jake said. "It's closer than town, and safer in this weather." Sarah felt a moment of worry. She barely knew this man, but what choice did she have? And he had already proved. He was kind. She decided to trust him. The drive took 30 minutes. Jake drove carefully, never going too fast despite the heavy truck. He knew these roads well. Sarah relaxed a little, watching him handle the big steering wheel with confidence. "I listen to the weather every morning," Jake said. "They said this storm was coming. I was driving around checking on the older folks who live out here alone, making sure they have what they need." "That's very thoughtful of you." Jake shrugged. "Neighbors help neighbors. That's how it works out here." They turned down a long driveway. Sarah could see lights ahead. Jake's house sat in a clearing surrounded by tall pine trees. It was a log cabin, but bigger than Sarah had expected. Warm light glowed from the windows. Jake parked close to the front door. He came around to help Sarah down from the truck. The snow was still falling hard, but the trees blocked some of the wind. "Watch your step," Jake said, keeping one hand on her arm. "The porch might be icy." Inside, the house was nothing like Sarah had imagined. She had expected a typical bachelor pad. Messy and basic, instead it was clean and comfortable. The furniture was oversized but well made. A fire crackled in a stone fireplace. "Let me take your coat," Jake said. He hung it on a peg by the door that was much too high for Sarah to reach. The main room had a couch, 2 chairs, and a coffee table, all built larger than normal to fit Jake's size. But they did not look out of place. They looked comfortable and inviting. "Are you hungry?" Jake asked. "I was just making some soup when I left to check on folks." Sarah realized she was hungry. The teachers' meeting had been long, and she had not eaten dinner. "That sounds wonderful," she said. Jake went into the kitchen. Sarah could hear him moving around, opening cabinets and stirring something on the stove. She looked around the room more carefully. The walls were covered with bookshelves. Not just a few books, but hundreds of them. Sarah walked closer to read the titles. She saw classics like Shakespeare and Dickens, philosophy books, poetry, history, science. On a side table sat several small wooden toys. They were beautifully carved: a horse, a truck, a little train. Sarah picked up the horse. The details were amazing. Every muscle and hair was perfect. I made those, Jake said from behind her. He had come back with a steaming bowl of soup. They're beautiful, Sarah said. You're very talented. Jake's face turned red. Just a hobby. Something to do with my hands. He gave her the bowl of soup. It was vegetable beef and smelled delicious. The bowl looked tiny in his hands, but normal in hers. Who are they for? Sarah asked, nodding toward the toys. The children's shelter in Billings, Jake said. I take them a box every few months. Sarah was surprised. You drive all the way to Billings? It's not that far. And those kids don't have much. A toy might make someone smile. Sarah tasted the soup. It was the best she had ever had. Homemade and rich with flavor. This is wonderful, she said. You're a good cook. My mom taught me before she died, Jake said. She said a man should know how to take care of himself. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. The fire warmed the room. The storm raged outside, but inside felt safe and peaceful. Classical music played softly from an old radio on the bookshelf. Sarah listened, surprised. She would not have expected a cowboy to listen to Mozart. You like classical music? She asked. Jake looked embarrassed again. I know it's not what people expect. A big guy like me should probably listen to country or rock, but I like the way classical music sounds. It's peaceful. Sarah smiled. I love classical music too. I just wouldn't have guessed. There's a lot about me people don't guess, Jake said quietly. Sarah was beginning to understand that. Everything about this evening was different from what she had expected. Jake was gentle and thoughtful. His house was clean and welcoming. He read books and made toys for children and listened to beautiful music. Can I ask you something? Sarah said. Jake nodded. Why do you live so far from town? Jake was quiet for a long moment. He stared into the fire. It's easier, he said finally. People in town, they see me and think certain things. Out here, I can just be myself. What do they think? That I'm dangerous, or stupid, or both. Big guys are supposed to be tough, right? Mean, angry. I'm not any of those things, but people don't always see that. Sarah looked at this gentle giant sitting across from her. He was trying to make himself smaller, hunched over in his chair, like he was apologizing for taking up space. I don't think you're dangerous, she said. Jake looked at her with surprise. You don't? No. I think you're kind and gentle and probably the nicest person I've met since coming to Willow Creek. Jake's eyes got bright. For a moment, Sarah thought he might cry. Thank you, he said quietly. That means more than you know. Outside, the storm continued to howl. But inside Jake's warm cabin, Sarah felt safer than she had in a long time. Not just from the weather, but from everything. She was starting to see who Jake Thompson really was, and she liked what she saw very much. Sarah woke up the next morning in Jake's guest room. The bed was comfortable, and she had slept better than she had in months. Sunlight streamed through the curtains. The storm had passed. She could smell coffee and something cooking. Her stomach growled as she got dressed. Jake had given her one of his clean t-shirts to sleep in. It was huge on her, hanging almost to her knees like a dress. When she came out to the kitchen, Jake was making pancakes. He was wearing jeans and a flannel shirt. His hair was damp from a shower. Good morning, he said with a smile. How did you sleep? Very well, thank you. You have a comfortable house. Jake flipped a pancake with practiced ease. Coffee's ready. Mugs are in the cabinet above the coffee pot. Sarah tried to reach the cabinet, but it was too high. Jake saw her struggling. Sorry, he said, reaching over her to get a mug. I forget that normal people can't reach my shelves. The mug looked like a toy cup in his hand, but it was normal size for Sarah. He poured her coffee and handed it to her carefully. We'll go get your car after breakfast, Jake said. I called my friend Mike. He owns the garage in town. He'll tow it in and fix it for you. Thank you for everything. I don't know what I would have done without your help. Jake's cheeks turned Pink. Anyone would have helped. Sarah was not so sure about that. In the city, people often drove past broken-down cars, but she did not say that. After breakfast, they drove to where Sarah's car sat buried in snow. It looked small and helpless next to Jake's big truck. Mike the mechanic was already there with his tow truck. "Morning, Jake," Mike said. He was a short, round man with greasy hands and a friendly face. "This the new teacher's car?" "That's right." "Sarah, this is Mike Hansen, best mechanic in 3 counties. Mike laughed. "Only mechanic in 3 counties. Nice to meet you, Sarah. Don't worry about your car. I'll have it running good as new." As Mike hooked up the car, Sarah watched Jake help clear snow from around the wheels. He worked steadily, never complaining about the cold or the early hour. "Jake's good people," Mike said quietly to Sarah. "Been helping folks around here for years. Never asks for anything in return." "He seems very kind," Sarah agreed. "Kind doesn't begin to cover it. Remember that ice storm 2 years ago? Jake checked on every elderly person within 50 miles. Chopped wood, carried groceries, fixed broken pipes. Worked for 3 days straight without stopping." Sarah was not surprised. It fit with what she was learning about Jake. Back in town, Jake dropped Sarah off at her house. She invited him in for coffee, but he said he had to get to work. "Thank you again," Sarah said as she got out of his truck. "For everything." "No problem, I'm glad you're safe." As Jake drove away, Sarah noticed Mrs. Chen watching from her post office window. When Sarah waved, the older woman smiled and waved back. The next few days, Sarah found herself thinking about Jake often. She had seen a different side of him. Away from the town's watchful eyes, he had been relaxed and natural. Funny, even. He had told her stories about growing up on his family's ranch, about his parents who had died in a car accident 5 years ago. On Friday afternoon, Sarah decided to go to the general store. She told herself she needed milk and bread, but really, she wanted to see Jake again. The store was busy when she arrived. Jake was behind the counter ringing up customers. Sarah noticed how he had to hunch over to use the cash register. Everything in the store was built for normal-sized people. A woman in front of Sarah was buying horse feed. The bags were heavy, probably 50 pounds each. She bought 6 bags. "Let me help you load those," Jake offered. "Oh, you don't need to do that," the woman said. But Jake was already lifting the bags like they weighed nothing. Sarah followed them. Outside, Jake loaded all 6 bags into the woman's truck in less than a minute. What would have taken 2 normal men to lift, he handled alone. "Thank you so much, Jake," the woman said. "You're a lifesaver." "Happy to help, Mrs. Patterson." As the woman drove away, Sarah approached Jake. "That was nice of you," she said. Jake shrugged. "She's 70 years old, too heavy for her to lift." "Do you help everyone like that?" "When I can." "Why let people struggle with things that are easy for me?" They were interrupted by shouting from down the street. A man's voice, loud and angry. Jake's head turned toward the sound, his expression changing. "Stay here," he said to Sarah. But she followed him anyway. The shouting was coming from the school. Sarah's school. Her heart jumped when she recognized the voice. It was Mr. Davis, Tommy's father, the same little boy Jake had helped with his scraped knee. Mr. Davis was yelling at Mrs. Watson, the principal. His face was red, and he was waving his arms around. "That teacher has no right to keep my boy after school," he shouted. "I'll teach him discipline my way." Sarah knew what this was about. Tommy had been acting up in class, not doing his homework. Sarah had asked him to stay after school for extra help. She had sent a note home to his parents explaining. "Mr. Davis, please calm down," Mrs. Watson was saying. "Miss Martinez is only trying to help Tommy with his reading." "I don't care." "No, one keeps my kid without asking me first." Other people on the street had stopped to watch. Sarah started to step forward, but Jake's big hand gently touched her arm. "Let me," he said quietly. Jake walked slowly toward the angry man. He did not hurry or look threatening. He just walked calmly down the sidewalk. When Mr. Davis saw Jake coming, he stopped yelling. Everyone in town knew Jake Thompson, and everyone knew he was stronger than 10 normal men. "Problem here?" Jake asked. His voice was calm and quiet, but somehow it carried clearly in the silence. "This is none of your business, Thompson," Mr. Davis said, but his voice was not as loud now. "Tommy's my friend," Jake said simply. "That makes it my business." Jake stopped about 10 feet away from Mr. Davis. He did not move closer or make any threatening gestures. He just stood there, calm and patient. "Mrs. Watson," Jake said, not taking his eyes off Mr. Davis. "What seems to be the trouble?" "Mr. Davis is upset that Tommy stayed after school for reading help," Mrs. Watson explained. Jake nodded slowly. "Tommy's a good kid, smart too. He just needs a little extra help with his letters." "That's not the point," Mr. Davis snapped. "No one keeps my kid without permission." "You're right," Jake said. "Sarah should have asked first. I'm sure she'll remember that next time." Sarah was surprised. Jake was agreeing with the angry man. But she could see what he was doing. He was diffusing the situation. "But Tommy does need help with reading," Jake continued. "And Miss Martinez is a good teacher. She cares about the kids." Mr. Davis looked uncertain now. Jake's calm presence was having an effect. "Look," Jake said, "why don't we all sit down and talk about this? Figure out what's best for Tommy." "I don't need to sit down with anyone," Mr. Davis said, but his voice was quieter now. "Of course not," Jake agreed. "You're Tommy's father. You know what's best for him. But maybe Miss Martinez could explain how the extra help works, so you can decide if it's right for Tommy." Sarah watched this interaction with amazement. Jake was not using his size to intimidate Mr. Davis. Instead, he was using words and patience. He was making the angry man feel heard and respected. It worked. Mr. Davis agreed to meet with Sarah and Mrs. Watson the next day to discuss Tommy's education. He left without any more shouting. "Thank you," Mrs. Watson said to Jake. "That could have gotten ugly." Jake nodded. "He's just worried about his boy. Fear makes people angry sometimes." As people started to go back to their business, Sarah walked over to Jake. "That was amazing," she said. "How did you do that?" "Do what?" "Calm him down like that." He was so angry. Jake looked uncomfortable with the praise. "I just talked to him, treated him with respect. Most people respond to that. But you could have, you're so much bigger than him. You could have just scared him off." Jake's face grew serious. "I never use my size to hurt or scare people, Sarah. Ever. That's not who I am." Sarah felt something warm spread through her chest. She was beginning to understand something important about Jake Thompson. His size was not his strength. His heart was. That evening, Sarah sat in her kitchen thinking about the day. She thought about how Jake had helped Mrs. Patterson with her horse feed, how he had handled Mr. Davis with patience and respect, how he always seemed to put others first. She was starting to see past his size to the man beneath. And what she saw there was beautiful. The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was her sister calling from Phoenix. "How's life in the wilderness?" her sister joked. "It's good," Sarah said. "Really good." They chatted for a while about Sarah's job and her new life. Then her sister asked the question Sarah had been expecting. "Met anyone interesting yet?" Sarah thought about Jake, his gentle hands carving toys for orphaned children, his shelf full of books, the way he had lifted her into his truck like she was precious cargo. "Maybe," Sarah said. "Ooh, tell me about him." Sarah paused. How could she explain Jake to someone who had never met him? How could she describe his kindness without mentioning his size? Because she was learning that his size was the least important thing about him. "He's different," Sarah said finally. "Not like anyone I've ever met." "Different how?" "Just different. In the best possible way." After they hung up, Sarah realized something had changed. When she thought about Jake now, she did not think about how tall he was first. She thought about his smile, his laugh, the way he made her feel safe and cared for. The Willow Creek Harvest Festival came in early October. Sarah had never seen the town so busy and happy. Main Street was decorated with pumpkins, hay bales, and orange and yellow ribbons. The air smelled like apple cider and fresh-baked pies. Sarah volunteered to help with the school's booth. They were selling homemade crafts to raise money for new books. But when she arrived at the festival grounds, Mrs. Watson had a different job for her. Jake Thompson asked for help with the pumpkin patch, Mrs. Watson said. His usual helper had to go out of town. Would you mind? Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She had not talked to Jake much since the incident with Mr. Davis a few weeks ago. She had seen him at the store, but they had only exchanged polite hellos. Of course, Sarah said. I'd be happy to help. The pumpkin patch was set up in a field behind the church. Jake had brought truckloads of pumpkins from local farms, big ones, small ones, and everything in between. There was also a corn maze that wound through the field. Jake was arranging pumpkins when Sarah arrived. He looked up and smiled when he saw her. Thank you for helping, he said. I wasn't sure how I was going to manage alone. What do you need me to do? Jake explained how the pumpkin patch worked. Families would come to pick out pumpkins. Children could get lost in the corn maze. Parents could buy apple cider and donuts from the stand. Mostly, we just help people find what they're looking for, Jake said, and keep an eye on the kids in the maze. The festival opened at noon. Soon, families were arriving to enjoy the fall activities. Sarah watched Jake with the visitors. He was patient with the children, helping them find the perfect pumpkin. He lifted heavy pumpkins that parents could not handle. He never seemed to get tired or frustrated. A group of teenagers came by around 2 o'clock. They were loud and acting tough. Sarah could tell they were looking for trouble. Hey, Giant, one of them called to Jake. How's the weather up there? Jake ignored them and kept helping a family with young children. I'm talking to you, freak, the teenager said louder. Jake straightened up slowly. Even from across the field, Sarah could see the teenagers shrink back a little. Jake was intimidating when he stood to his full height. But instead of getting angry, Jake smiled. Pretty nice day, he said calmly. You boys looking for pumpkins? The teenagers looked confused. They had expected Jake to get mad or scared. Instead, he was being friendly. We don't need any stupid pumpkins, the leader said. Fair enough, Jake said. How about the corn maze? It's pretty challenging this year. One of the younger boys looked interested. Is it really hard? Very hard, Jake said seriously. I don't think tough guys like you could make it through. It was perfect. Psychology. The teenagers immediately wanted to prove they could handle the maze. We'll show you, the leader said. They marched off toward the corn maze entrance. Sarah walked over to Jake. That was clever, she said. They're not bad kids, Jake said. Just trying to act tough. The maze will tire them out and give them something to do. Around 4 o'clock, they heard crying from the corn maze. A little girl's voice, scared and upset. Someone's lost, Sarah said. Jake was already moving toward the maze. Stay here in case the parents come looking. But Sarah followed him anyway. The corn maze was taller than she was, but Jake could see over most of it. He moved quickly but carefully through the narrow paths. They found the little girl in the center of the maze. She was about 5 years old with blonde pigtails. Tears streamed down her face. I can't find my mommy, she sobbed. Jake knelt down, making himself small and less scary. The little girl stopped crying and stared at him with wide eyes. Hey there, sweetheart, Jake said softly. What's your name? Emma, the little girl whispered. Hi, Emma. I'm Jake. This is my friend Sarah. We're going to help you find your mommy, okay? Emma nodded, sniffling. Are you hurt anywhere? Jake asked gently. Emma shook her head. Good. Now I bet your mommy is looking for you too. She's probably worried. But don't worry, we'll find her. Jake looked around thinking. The maze was big and confusing. It would take time to walk Emma out, and she was already scared and tired. Emma, Jake said, I'm going to pick you up so I can see over the corn. Is that okay? Emma looked uncertain. Jake was very big and she was very small. It's okay, Sarah said, kneeling down next to Jake. Jake is very gentle and very strong. He'll keep you safe. Emma nodded. Jake lifted her carefully, holding her high enough that she could see over the corn stalks. "Can you see your mommy?" Jake asked. Emma looked around. "There," she pointed, "by the pumpkins." Sure enough, a woman was standing by the pumpkin display looking around frantically. "Let's go find her," Jake said. But instead of carrying Emma through the maze, Jake did something Sarah did not expect. He started to sing. It was a lullaby, soft and gentle. Sarah recognized it from when she was little. Jake's deep voice made it sound like a gentle rumble. Emma stopped sniffling and listened. Other people in the maze heard it too and started moving toward the sound. Soon Emma's mother came running around a corner of the maze. "Emma. Oh, thank God." The woman's face was streaked with tears. Jake gently set Emma down and she ran to her mother. "Thank you so much," the mother said to Jake. "I was so scared she just disappeared." "She's a brave girl," Jake said. "Just got a little lost. It happens." After Emma and her mother left, Sarah and Jake walked back to the pumpkin patch. "That was beautiful," Sarah said. "The way you handled that, the song." Jake looked embarrassed. "My mom used to sing that to me when I was little. It always made me feel better. You were so good with her. Natural." "I like kids," Jake said simply. "They don't see size first. They see if you're kind or mean, safe or scary. It's simpler with children." As the afternoon went on, Sarah learned more about Jake. She watched him help an elderly man load pumpkins into his car. She saw him fix a broken wagon wheel with his bare hands. She noticed how he always bent down to talk to children at their level. Around 6 o'clock, the festival was winding down. They were cleaning up when those teenagers came back from the corn maze. They looked tired and humble. "That maze was harder than we thought," the leader admitted to Jake. "Did you make it through?" Jake asked. "Yeah, but it took forever. You were right. It was challenging." Jake smiled. "You boys did good. Want some free cider before you go?" The teenagers looked surprised by the offer. They accepted gratefully and left without any more trouble. "You ma, have a gift with people," Sarah told Jake as they loaded the last of the pumpkins into his truck. "What do you mean? You see what people need. That angry father needed respect. Those teenagers needed a challenge. That little girl needed comfort. You gave them all exactly what they needed." Jake was quiet for a moment. "When you're different like me, you learn to read people. You have to. It's survival." "Different isn't bad, Jake," Sarah said. "Different can be wonderful." They drove back to town as the sun was setting. The mountains were purple in the twilight. Sarah felt peaceful sitting in Jake's truck, watching the familiar scenery go by. "Sarah," Jake said as they reached her house, "can I ask you something?" "Of course. Why don't I scare you? Most women, they take one look at me and see a monster, but you don't." "Why?" Sarah thought about his question. It was something she had wondered about herself. "Because I took the time to really look," she said finally, "and when I did, I saw who you really are. Kind, gentle, protective. Those are not scary things, Jake. Those are beautiful things." Jake's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "You really mean that?" "I really do." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Jake walked her to her door, ducking under the low-hanging branch that never bothered anyone else. "Thank you for today," he said. "For helping. For understanding." "Thank you for letting me see the real you," Sarah replied. As she watched Jake drive away, Sarah realized something had changed between them. The walls that kept Jake isolated from others were starting to come down, at least with her. And for the first time since her divorce, Sarah felt her own walls beginning to crumble too. Maybe it was time to take a chance on something new, something different. Something that might be exactly what she had been looking for all along. After the harvest festival, Sarah and Jake started spending more time together. It began innocently enough. Jake would stop by the school to help fix things that were broken. Sarah would visit the general store more often than she really needed. Christy and they had coffee together at Murphy's Diner on Saturday mornings. They took walks through the mountains on Sunday afternoons. Jake showed Sarah the best fishing spots and wildflower meadows. Sarah shared stories about her students and her life before Willow Creek. At first, people in town thought it was nice that Sarah had made a friend. Jake had been alone for so long. It was good to see him talking and laughing with someone. But, as weeks passed, the nature of their friendship became clear. This was not just friendship. Sarah and Jake were falling in love. The whispers started quietly. People talking in hushed voices at the post office and the bank. Concerned looks passed between neighbors. Sarah noticed the change in how people treated her. Mrs. Henderson at the bank became cooler toward her. "Are you sure you know what you're doing, dear?" she asked one day when Sarah came to cash her paycheck. "What do you mean?" Sarah asked, though she suspected she knew. "With Jake Thompson. He's a nice man, but, well, you know." Sarah did know. She knew that people thought Jake was too big for her, too different, too much. The talk got worse when Sarah's sister came to visit in November. Rachel Martinez was 2 years older than Sarah and had always been protective. She drove up from Denver to see Sarah's new life. Rachel was horrified when she met Jake. "Sarah, what are you thinking?" she whispered when Jake left them alone for a few minutes at the diner. "He's enormous. He's also kind and funny and smart," Sarah said. "But look at him. He makes you look like a child next to him. People must stare everywhere you go." It was true. People did stare. Sarah had gotten used to it, but it bothered Rachel. "I don't care if people stare," Sarah said. "Well, you should. And what about practical things? Where will you live? His house is built for giants. How will you reach anything? What about kids? What if you have children and they're huge like him?" Sarah had not thought about children yet. She and Jake were just starting their relationship, but Rachel's questions planted seeds of doubt. That evening, Rachel insisted on cooking dinner for Jake. She wanted to get to know him better. Sarah was nervous about what her sister might say. Jake came to Sarah's tiny house with flowers and a bottle of wine. He had to duck to get through the doorway. Once inside, he looked even bigger than usual. The furniture was too small for him. He perched carefully on Sarah's couch like he might break it. Rachel was polite but distant during dinner. She asked Jake about his work, his family, his plans for the future. Jake answered honestly and kindly, but Sarah could see her sister's disapproval growing. After Jake left, Rachel did not hold back. "Sarah, I'm worried about you," she said. "This man is not right for you." "Why?" "Because he's tall." "It's not just that he's tall. He's a giant. You look ridiculous next to him, like a little girl playing dress-up." Sarah felt anger rise in her chest. "That's a terrible thing to say." "I'm being honest. Someone has to. You're thinking with your heart, not your head. What kind of life can you have with someone like that?" "Someone like what? Someone kind? Someone who treats me well? Someone who doesn't fit in the normal world?" Rachel said. "Sarah, be practical. How will you travel together? How will you go to restaurants or movies? Everyone will stare. Some people will make cruel comments. Is that really what you want?" Sarah spent a sleepless night thinking about Rachel's words. As much as she hated to admit it, some of them were true. She and Jake did get stares when they went places together. She had heard a few whispered comments. Most people in Willow Creek were kind, but not everyone was. The next morning, Rachel apologized for being harsh, but she made her feelings clear before she left. "I just want you to be happy," she said. "But I don't think this man can give you the life you deserve. You're settling for someone because you're lonely. You could do so much better." After Rachel left, Sarah felt confused and sad. She loved Jake. She was sure of that. But were they wrong to think they could have a normal relationship? The doubt grew when Sarah overheard a conversation at the grocery store the next week. Two women were talking in the next aisle, not knowing Sarah was there. "I feel sorry for that little teacher," one said. "She doesn't realize what she's getting into with Jake Thompson. He's too much man for her," the other agreed. "She'll figure it out eventually, they always do." Remember what happened with Jenny Walsh? She lasted 6 months before she couldn't take the staring anymore. This won't last either. Poor Jake, he keeps trying to find someone who can handle his size. But it never works out. Sarah left the store without buying anything. She felt sick to her stomach. That evening, Jake came by as he often did after work. But Sarah was distant and quiet. Jake noticed immediately. "What's wrong?" he asked. "You seem upset." "I'm fine," Sarah said, but she did not look at him. "Sarah, I know something's bothering you. Please tell me." Sarah sighed. "Do you ever think about how different we are?" "Different how?" "You know how. Your size. My size. The way people look at us." Jake was quiet for a long moment. "Yes," he said finally. "I think about it every day." "Does it bother you? The staring? The comments?" "Of course it bothers me, but not enough to give up what we have." "But what if it gets worse? What if people never accept us?" Jake sat down heavily in the oversized chair he had brought from his house so he would have somewhere to sit in Sarah's living room. "Is that what you're worried about, what other people think?" "I'm worried about a lot of things," Sarah admitted. "Practical things, how we would live together, whether we could have a normal life." "Normal," Jake repeated. "What's normal, Sarah?" "My whole life I've never been normal. I gave up on normal a long time ago. But I've always been normal," Sarah said. "Maybe I need normal." The words hung in the air between them. Jake's face went pale. "Are you saying you want to end this?" he asked quietly. "I don't know," Sarah said honestly. "I'm confused. Everyone keeps telling me this won't work, that we're too different, maybe they're right." Jake stood up slowly. He looked tired and sad. "I see," he said. "I understand." "Jake, I didn't say—" "You don't have to say anything, Sarah. I've been through this before. I know how it goes. People get scared of what other people will think. They decide I'm too much trouble." "That's not what I'm saying, isn't it?" Jake asked. "You're worried about what people think, about whether we can have a normal life, about practical things. Those are all ways of saying I'm too big for your world." Sarah felt tears starting. "Jake, please don't. It's okay," Jake said quietly. "I understand. I hoped maybe this time would be different. But I understand." He walked to the door, ducking under the frame. "I'll always care about you, Sarah. I hope you find the normal life you're looking for." And then he was gone. Sarah sat alone in her house and cried. She had not broken up with Jake exactly, but she had not fought for him either. She had let fear and other people's opinions drive him away. Over the next few days, Sarah barely saw Jake. He was not working at the general store when she went there. He did not come by the school. It was like he had disappeared. The town noticed too. People asked Sarah if everything was okay between her and Jake. She did not know what to say. Mrs. Chen from the post office found Sarah crying in the diner one day. "Oh, honey," the older woman said, sitting down across from her. "What happened?" "I think I made a terrible mistake," Sarah said. "With Jake?" Sarah nodded. "Do you love him?" Mrs. Chen asked. "Yes," Sarah whispered. "Then what's the problem?" "Everyone says it won't work, that we're too different, that I don't know what I'm getting into." Mrs. Chen looked at Sarah with kind but serious eyes. "Let me tell you something, dear. I've lived in this town for 40 years. I've watched Jake Thompson grow up. I've seen him help every person in this town at one time or another. I've seen women come and go in his life, all afraid of the same things you're afraid of. Maybe they were right to be afraid. Were they? Or were they too worried about what other people thought to see what was right in front of them?" Mrs. Chen leaned forward. "Sarah, love is not about being the same size or looking perfect together. Love is about finding someone who makes your life better. Someone who cares for you and protects you and makes you laugh. Does Jake do those things?" "Yes," Sarah said. "Then the only question is whether you're brave enough to choose love over fear." As Mrs. Chen walked away, Sarah realized she had been asking the wrong questions. The question was not whether she and Jake were different. The question was whether their differences mattered more than their love. and Sarah was beginning to think she had the answer all wrong. 2 weeks passed without Sarah talking to Jake. She missed him terribly. Every morning she hoped to see his truck at the general store. Every evening she listened for his footsteps on her porch. But Jake stayed away. Sarah threw herself into her teaching. She helped her students with their Christmas play. She graded papers late into the night. She tried to stay busy so she would not think about the gentle giant who had stolen her heart. But she could not stop thinking about him. She remembered his laugh, the way he made her feel safe, how carefully he held her hand in his enormous one, the books on his shelves and the toys he carved for children he had never met. Then, on a cold Tuesday afternoon in December, everything changed. Sarah was cleaning her classroom after school when she heard a car door slam outside. Then another. She looked out the window and froze. A man was walking toward the school. She recognized him immediately. It was her ex-husband, Mark, the man she had divorced a year ago, the man she had moved to Montana to escape. Mark looked angry. His face was red and he walked with quick, aggressive steps. Sarah's heart started racing. What was he doing here? How had he found her? Sarah locked her classroom door and tried to think. The front door of the school was probably locked, but Mark was determined. If he wanted to get in, he would find a way. She heard the front door rattle, then slam open. Mark was inside the building. "Sarah," he yelled. "I know you're here. Your car is outside." Sarah grabbed her purse and headed for the back door of her classroom. But it led to a hallway, not outside. She was trapped. Mark's voice got closer. "Sarah, we need to talk. You can't keep running from me." Sarah heard his footsteps in the hallway. Her hands shook as she tried to think of what to do. Should she call the police? Her phone was in her purse, but her hands were shaking too much to dial. Mark appeared in the doorway of her classroom. He looked older than she remembered, thinner. His eyes were wild and desperate. "There you are," he said. "Do you know how hard it's been to find you?" "What do you want, Mark?" Sarah tried to keep her voice steady. "I want you to come home. We can work this out, Sarah. We were good together." "No, we weren't. That's why I divorced you." Mark stepped into the room. "You overreacted, so I drank a little too much sometimes. So we fought. All couples fight. You threw a plate at my head, Mark. You pushed me down the stairs. I was upset. I'm better now. I've been going to counseling." Sarah did not believe him. Mark had always been good at saying what people wanted to hear, but his eyes still had that angry look she remembered. "I'm not coming back," Sarah said firmly. "We're divorced. It's over." Mark's face got redder. "You think you can just disappear? Start over like I never existed?" "That's exactly what I think." "Well, you're wrong. You're my wife." "Ex-wife." Mark stepped closer. Sarah backed up until she hit the blackboard. "I heard you've been sleeping around up here," Mark said with a sneer. "Some giant freak, according to what I found out. What's wrong, Sarah? Normal men not good enough for you anymore?" Sarah felt anger replace her fear. "Don't you dare talk about Jake that way." "Oh, it's Jake, is it? Tell me, Sarah, how does that work? Does he have to bend down to kiss you? Do you need a ladder to—" "Stop it," Sarah said. But Mark was enjoying himself now. "I bet people stare everywhere you go. I bet they think it's some kind of circus act, the tiny woman and the giant man." "Get out," Sarah said. "I'm not going anywhere without you." Mark grabbed Sarah's arm. His grip was tight and painful. "Let go of me," Sarah said. "Not until you listen to reason." Mark started pulling Sarah toward the door. She tried to resist, but he was stronger than her. He had always been stronger. "You're coming with me right now," Mark said. "We're going to talk this through like adults." I said, "Let go." Sarah tried to pull away, but Mark tightened his grip. She was starting to panic. This was exactly what she had been afraid of. This was why she had run to Montana in the first place. Then she heard something that made her heart leap with relief. Footsteps in the hallway. Heavy footsteps. Very heavy footsteps. Mark heard them too. He looked toward the door with confusion. Jake Thompson appeared in the doorway. Sarah had never been so happy to see anyone in her life. Jake looked exactly the same as always. Gentle, brown eyes, Careful, controlled movements. But there was something different about him today. Something protective and fierce. "Let her go," Jake said quietly. Mark looked up at Jake and his face went pale. Sarah realized that Mark had never actually seen Jake before. He had heard about him, but seeing him was different. Jake filled the entire doorway. His head almost touched the frame. His shoulders were broader than Mark was tall. He made Mark look like a child. "This is between me and my wife," Mark said, but his voice was not as confident as before. "Ex-wife," Jake corrected. "And she asked you to let her go." Mark's grip on Sarah's arm loosened a little, but he did not let go completely. "This is none of your business, giant," Mark said, trying to sound tough. Jake stepped into the room. He moved slowly, carefully, but there was no mistaking the power in his movements. "Sarah is my business," Jake said simply. "Yeah? And what are you going to do about it?" Jake did not answer. He just stood there, calm and patient, but his presence filled the room. The air felt different with him there. Safer. Mark looked back and forth between Jake and Sarah. Sarah could see him calculating. Could he fight Jake? Could he run? Could he talk his way out of this? "Look," Mark said. "I just want to talk to my wife. That's not a crime." "She's not your wife," Jake said. "And she doesn't want to talk to you." "How do you know what she wants?" Jake's eyes never left Mark's face. "Because I listened to her." It was a simple statement, but it hit Mark like a slap. Because Jake was right. Mark had never listened to Sarah. He had always talked over her, dismissed her feelings, ignored her words. "Sarah," Mark said, "tell your boyfriend to back off." "This is between us," Sarah found her voice. "No, Mark, Jake is right. I don't want to talk to you. I want you to leave." "You don't mean that." "I do mean it. I've been trying to tell you that for months before I left Phoenix. You just never listened." Mark's face twisted with anger. "Fine. You want to stay here with your freak boyfriend? You deserve each other." He started to leave, but then turned back. "You know this won't last, don't you, Sarah? You and the giant? People will laugh at you. You'll get tired of being a sideshow." Sarah felt tears start, but not from sadness. From anger. "People might laugh," she said, "but at least Jake treats me with respect. At least he never hurt me. At least he sees me as an equal, not as property." Mark's hand tightened on her arm again. "You little—" He never finished the sentence. Jake moved faster than Sarah had ever seen him move. One moment he was standing by the door. The next moment his hand was on Mark's wrist. Jake did not squeeze, he did not twist. He just held Mark's wrist in his enormous hand. But it was enough. Mark let go of Sarah immediately. "Time for you to go," Jake said quietly. Mark tried to pull, his wrist free, but Jake's grip was like iron. Not painful, but absolutely unmovable. "You can't threaten me," Mark said. "I'm not threatening you," Jake said. "I'm removing you." Jake walked Mark toward the door, still holding his wrist. Mark had no choice but to follow. At the classroom door, Jake let go. "If you come back," Jake said, "if you bother Sarah again, we'll have a different kind of conversation." Mark rubbed his wrist and glared up at Jake. But he was smart enough not to push his luck with a man who could probably bench press a car. "This isn't over," Mark said to Sarah. "Yes, it is," Sarah said firmly. "Don't come back, Mark. There's nothing here for you." Mark left, muttering threats under his breath. They heard his car start and drive away. Sarah sank into a chair, shaking. The fear and adrenaline were catching up with her. Jake knelt down beside her chair. "Are you okay? Did he hurt you?" Sarah shook her head. "My arm is a little sore, but I'm fine. Thank you. If you hadn't come—" "How did you know to come here?" Sarah asked. "Mrs. Chen saw a strange car parked outside the school. She knew you usually left by now, so she got worried. She called me." Sarah smiled through her tears. "I love this town." Jake was quiet for a moment. "Sarah, I know we haven't been talking lately, but when Mrs. Chen called and said you might be in trouble, I couldn't stay away." Sarah looked into Jake's kind eyes that had never looked at her with anger or possession. eyes that saw her as a person, not a thing to be owned. "I'm glad you came," she said. "I'm glad you're here." "Even though I'm a giant freak?" Jake asked with a sad smile. Sarah reached up and touched his face. "You're not a freak. You're my hero." Jake's eyes filled with tears. "Sarah, I love you," Sarah said. "I love you, and I've been an idiot. I let other people's opinions matter more than my own heart." "You were scared, I understand." "I was scared of the wrong things," Sarah said. "I was scared of what people would think, but I should have been scared of losing you." Jake took her hands in his enormous ones. "I love you too," he said softly. "I never stopped loving you. Can you forgive me for being such a coward?" "There's nothing to forgive. You needed time to think, to be sure." Sarah stood up and wrapped her arms around Jake's waist. Even standing, her head barely reached his chest. But for the first time, the difference in their sizes felt right. Perfect, even. 6 months later, on a warm day in June, Sarah Martinez became Sarah Thompson. The wedding was held in the little church in Willow Creek, the same church where Jake had grown up. The entire town came to the wedding. Even people who had doubted their relationship were there, smiling and celebrating. Mrs. Chen cried happy tears. Mrs. Henderson brought a beautiful cake. Linda Murphy closed the diner so everyone could attend. Sarah's sister Rachel came from Denver. She had apologized months ago for her harsh words. She had also met Jake several more times and finally understood what Sarah saw in him. "I was wrong about him," Rachel had admitted. "He's wonderful. And the way he looks at you, I've never seen anyone look at someone with such love." Sarah's wedding dress had to be altered several times, not because Sarah changed her mind about the style, but because the seamstress had never made a dress for a bride who would be standing next to a groom who was almost 7 feet tall. "We need to make sure you can be seen in the photos," the seamstress had joked. Jake wore a custom-made tuxedo. It was the first formal wear that had ever fit him properly. He looked handsome and nervous as he waited at the altar. When Sarah walked down the aisle, she felt like the luckiest woman in the world. Not because she was marrying the tallest man in Montana, but because she was marrying the best man she had ever known. The ceremony was simple and beautiful. Pastor Williams, who had known Jake since he was born, spoke about love that sees past differences to the heart beneath. "Love is not about finding someone who fits your idea of perfect," he said. "Love is about finding someone who makes you want to be your best self." When it came time for the vows, Jake went first. He had written his own words. "Sarah," he said, his deep voice carrying easily through the small church. "You saw me when others only saw my size. You looked past what made me different and found what made me whole. You taught me that love isn't about fitting in. It's about finding someone who accepts all of you, even the parts that don't match anyone else." Sarah's vows were simple but heartfelt. "Jake, you showed me what real strength looks like. Not the kind that hurts or controls, but the kind that protects and nurtures. You made me feel safe in a world that had taught me to be afraid. You showed me that different can be beautiful, and unusual can be perfect." When Pastor Williams told Jake he could kiss his bride, Jake knelt down so Sarah could reach him. It was not the first time he had done this, but it was the most important. The whole church erupted in applause and cheers. At the reception, held in the church hall, Sarah and Jake had their first dance as husband and wife. Jake had worried about this moment for weeks. "I don't know how to dance with someone so small," he had told Sarah during one of their planning sessions. "We'll figure it out together," Sarah had promised, and they did. When the music started, Jake lifted Sarah up so she was standing on his feet. She held onto his shoulders while he swayed gently to the music. To everyone watching, it looked like Sarah was floating. "How's the view up there?" Jake whispered. "Perfect," Sarah whispered back. "Everything looks perfect from here." They danced like that for the entire song, Sarah on Jake's feet, both of them laughing and smiling. It was unconventional, but it was theirs. Later, as the party continued, Sarah's student Tommy came up to them. He was now 8 years old and much more confident than he had been when Jake first helped him with his scraped knee. "Mrs. Thompson," Tommy said, "are you going to have giant babies?" The adults nearby gasped, but Sarah just laughed. I don't know, Tommy. What do you think? I think they'll be perfect babies, Tommy said seriously, because they'll have the nicest parents in the world. Out of the mouths of babes, Sarah thought. Tommy understood what some adults still struggled with. Love was about the heart, not the size. As the evening wound down, Sarah and Jake prepared to leave for their honeymoon. They were going to drive through the national parks, something they both loved. Jake had bought a new truck with an extra comfortable seat for Sarah. Before they left, Mrs. Chen pulled Sarah aside. I want to tell you something, the older woman said. I've lived in this town for 40 years. I've seen a lot of couples come and go, but I've never seen two people who fit together as well as you and Jake. Thank you, Sarah said. That means a lot. You know what I think? Mrs. Chen continued. I think God made Jake so big so he could love someone as much as he loves you. A normal-sized heart wouldn't have room for that much love. Sarah felt tears start. That's beautiful. And I think God made you the perfect size to be loved by someone like Jake. You're not too small for him, dear. You're exactly right. As Sarah and Jake drove away from their wedding reception, Sarah thought about Mrs. Chen's words. For so long, people had focused on their physical differences, but the truth was they fit together perfectly in all the ways that mattered. Jake was gentle where Sarah was strong. Sarah was fearless where Jake was cautious. Jake protected Sarah from the world's harshness. Sarah helped Jake see his own worth. Their love story was not conventional. It would never be. People would always stare when they walked down the street together. Children would always ask curious questions. Some people would always wonder how it worked. But Sarah no longer cared about any of that. She had learned something important about love. Real love was not about looking perfect together in photographs. It was about making each other feel complete. Year after their wedding, Sarah and Jake bought a house together. It was bigger than Sarah's tiny place but smaller than Jake's ranch house. They renovated it together, putting in counters at 2 different heights so they could both cook comfortably. They bought furniture that worked for both of them. Sarah got pregnant 18 months after their wedding. Jake was terrified and excited in equal measure. What if the baby is as big as me? He worried. What if something goes wrong? Then we'll handle it, Sarah said calmly. Together. Their daughter was born on a snowy day in February. She was perfectly healthy and absolutely beautiful. She was not a giant, but she was not tiny either. She was exactly the right size to be loved by both her parents. They named her Hope, because that's what she represented. Hope that love could overcome any obstacle. Hope that differences could be strengths. Hope that two people who seemed impossible together could create something beautiful. On Hope's first birthday, the whole town came to celebrate. The little girl crawled fearlessly between legs of all sizes, comfortable with everyone. She had inherited her father's gentle nature and her mother's fierce independence. As Sarah watched Jake play with their daughter, lifting her high in the air while she giggled with delight, she marveled at how far they had come. Once upon a time, nobody had wanted to be the giant cowboy's wife. Women had been scared of his size, intimidated by his difference, worried about what people would think. But Sarah had learned to see past all of that to the gentle heart beneath. And in doing so, she had found the greatest love of her life. Jake was right that he was not normal. He was extraordinary. And Sarah would not change a single thing about him, including his size. Because sometimes the most beautiful love stories are the ones that don't look like love stories at all. Sometimes perfect love comes in imperfect proportions. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you get to live happily ever after with someone who makes you feel like you're exactly the right size, no matter what anyone else thinks. Sarah Thompson had found her fairy tale. It just happened to star a gentle giant instead of a prince, and that made it perfect.